Hi, I'm Caroline. Welcome to The Stylish Pen, where Susan Scott and I have authentic conversations on the sometimes heartbreaking world of writing, editing, and publishing. Today, we're going to talk about, sorry, what's your name again? So, we chose this because when I was writing my memoir, I had a lot of problems with names. And when I moved to Poland, my name, which seems normal, Caroline Topperman, suddenly brought up a whole bunch of problems for me in a Polish speaking crowd. And we were just talking about this a few minutes ago, but I grew up in a household that spoke Polish for its first language. I went to an English nursery school, a Hebrew kindergarten, and then I went into French school. So I often pronounce words wrong and need to be corrected.
Yeah, and I grew up in a household with a profoundly deaf sibling who could never pronounce my name because she couldn't say S's properly. So from early on, I learned that you often have to code switching, right? Code switching is a normal part of trying to present yourself in the world. And when it comes to the book world, and you know how you want to identify yourself and how you want to move through the world and how you want people to remember you, you need to have that memorable name that everyone can pronounce and get behind. And yeah, because the name of the author is the only name that counts.
That's right. And if you want to just explore this for yourself a little bit, there's this really great book, You've Changed. And the author is Pei Mo Tet War, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing wrong, but she has a very extensive explanation of how to pronounce her name in her book. And she's a Myanmar author who studied in the States and then in London a little bit, and then finally moved home. And it's actually really great for that, to really discover that. She talks a lot about that, the names and how they change and the words, and when you're flipping between English and whatever language you may be speaking at home, and how she's had to deal with it. And this book just came out this year, so it's a very recent example.
So where is that put? Is it right at the front of the book that they deal with the whole question about pronunciation and?
It's fake accents and feminism, but she goes into it right at the beginning. It's a series of essays. So she goes in, I think she tried to call herself Lizzie for a while, which
Lindsay.
Lizzie.
Oh, Lizzie. Oh, Lizzie.
Yeah, which I think is weird. This is way her real name, even though I've probably butchered it, is to me much more interesting. It's way better than Lizzie. No offense to all the Lizzies out there, but she goes right into it with her name and how to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Right.
Yeah.
So we've moved to a place now where, and this is a good sign, we moved to a place in publishing where these things are just front and center. Just put it right out there and invite people right into the conversation. And if it makes you feel awkward that you don't know how to pronounce something, that's okay. We're just going to talk about it right up front and not advise a euphemistic name like Lizzie something, whatever she had to cast that one off and let go of that identity. But that's
yeah. Well, because the whole idea is, we were talking about, like, do you have that writerly name? And a lot of people, we've brought up the examples of Zadie Smith, Stephen King, Margaret Atwood, and these are names that are easy to say. They roll off the tongue. They're not a problem. You can spell them for the most part. And we are laughing, though, that sometimes it hits you when you don't even expect it, because the first thing I asked you was, okay, so do you pronounce your name Susan or Suzanne? That was one of our first conversations.
If I had maybe, come from an upper class family or gone to Queens, I'm sure it would be Suzanne. But no, it's just Susan. And interestingly enough, of course, Susan Scott is one of the worst possible names to have, because there's scads of Susan Scotts who write. We're in different continents. There are a number of us. So how are you going to distinguish yourself? And early on, I made the mistake, people often do this, of switching around different things, like using initials initially, and then so SL Scott or Susan L, Susan Scott, like, what is it going to be? And I shuffled just to try things on for size. But that becomes a problem down the road. So that's one of the reasons why we're even having this conversation with people, because when it comes to cataloging and identifiability, etc., you have to be consistent. So you want to pick that name early on and stay with it, make your peace with it. And yeah, I learned that lesson the hard way.
And we want to call out 49th Shelf if you're listening, because there's another Susan Scott. She's a Calgary journalist. Is that right?
Yeah, she does
And
fabulous work, beautiful work, but it's
oh
her
yeah,
own, it's not mine. Yeah, yeah.
but your book is listed under her name, and that's a bit of a problem because if people are
Yeah.
looking for it, and then I think somebody else found you on LinkedIn. She's from
Yes.
she's in Africa, I believe. Yeah, and she has the same name, and then somebody else showed up from Australia in your writing group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting too. And there's a very distinguished visual artist in Montreal, Susan G. Scott. And unfortunately, when I go to Montreal to do workshops, all these people show up thinking I'm going to be that Susan, Susan,
no.
and I'm not, and I have to disappoint them bitterly. I'm not the Susan you're hoping for. I'm the Susan L, not the Susan G. But sometimes it seems pretentious to use the middle initial, right? It seems pretentious, so I'll just go by Susan Scott, and then all these people will come expecting this fabulous visual artist. By the way, all the other Susan Scotts are doing fantastic work. Hats off to them. I wish I could take credit for the work that they're doing, but yeah, it's this irony that's just confusing to people. Well, which is it, and how would we know? And then things that I did under as L. Scott, people can't find anymore, and that's not very
yeah, and this isn't just a North American problem. That's the funny thing. I mean, of course, we're sitting here, and I start to panic. I start to sweat every time I have to bring up a new name. But I had the same thing happen to me. Caroline Topperman, not a hard name, pretty basic. You can kind of just say it. I moved to Poland, and suddenly I'm listening to my husband, who's thrilled because finally everyone can pronounce his name. And everybody's sitting there, and he's pronouncing my name because the C would be soft. In Polish, it's spelled with a K. So you hear Caroline Topperman, like he's just going through it, and it sounded so ridiculous, and it was hilarious, and no one could say it. And it was the first time that I experienced that with a name that I thought was pretty basic. But then we were comparing this, and we were talking about Essie Dujan, and how when you see her name written and you see her last name, and you can go through 10 different ways of trying to say her name. We had to look it up. We had to go and actually listen to a video where she was introduced.
Exactly. And you want to do that out of respect for the author, right? You don't want to be butchering that person's name. It's just, it's not right. In this day and age, we can pretty much always track down the pronunciation of someone's name and just do it, right? And if you're going to be an interviewer, or, you're the librarian who brings that person in, or you're a teacher, or you're an editor, any situation that you're in where you have to pronounce that person's name, it really is incumbent upon you to get it right, and not to fudge it. Little plea that we're issuing. So, what are you going to do when your memoir becomes a bestseller and they want to pick it up and produce it in Poland? How are you going to? How are you going to solve that problem of easy to pronounce here, but then in Poland, where all your roots are, they're going to be still going back Carolina.
So part of me hopes that the book is banned in Poland, which will just make an instant bestseller. But yeah, I don't know. Usually they revert to Carolina, so that's probably what will happen if I'm getting introduced. But no, my name is my name. We also have the added benefit, bonus, I don't know, difficulty of my name in that my last name when I was born was Wichrzycki, and it was changed for obvious reasons. Try to say that 3 times fast. And so that's sort of there as well, always in the background, because that's my father's family name. So it adds a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But I think that, and hopefully here, and I think probably in North America, because for what it's worth, we actually have the most multicultural societies compared to a country like Poland, for example. So I think as the diversity and racialized writers like gain traction, which slowly, painfully is, hopefully coming, happening, as they break new ground, these like so-called uncommon names will hopefully become more common.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you think about it, that's part of the beauty of the work of culture, right? Is those of us who work in arts and culture, we want to be on the forefront of introducing that kind of trend, normalizing that trend in society at large, right? So it falls to us to just make it perfectly normal and common and celebratory to have diversified names and teach everybody how to pronounce them and celebrate it. It just helps. It's a trickle down effect, right? It just helps
Mhm.
everybody everywhere. Yeah, okay, this is good. We
And I
embrace
think
this. So
and I think you're right, because it was like we talked about this, that Barack Obama, for example, at first everybody was really freaked out to say his name and nobody knew how to say it until it became normalized, and now it's like, what's the big deal? His name's
yeah,
easy to say.
yeah,
And there's a CBC reporter now as well, and I just I respect her, and I don't want to
yeah.
butcher her name, but she went back to her
Indigenous
own name.
Indigenous name
Yeah,
and
her
stuff.
indigenous
Yeah, and
name.
her byline is now the Indigenous spelling and Indigenous name of her home community. So that's
Mhm.
exactly. Except just to go, oh, okay, this is what this is. It isn't anglicized anymore. We have to
Mhm.
learn this is the identity she goes by, and watching her do that in real time has been really interesting. It's part of that shift in Canada anyway, right, where we're really trying to understand what does it mean to indigenize the culture and to bring those to the fore and learn to pronounce things. And that's okay. We can do that. We can manage. We
Yeah,
can do this.
yeah. And I think, as long as everybody has a little bit of a sense of humor about it and understands that it might be something for them, but I think as long as people are trying, it's okay. And, it's just when you were saying this now, I was thinking with regards to my name, for example. My name's not hard. It's nothing, I don't have a difficult name. However, my mom, who is since she's deceased, and she had a reason for giving me my name, and she actually, it was the she had it was she meant for it to be pronounced in French anyway. She had lived in Paris before
Hmm.
I was born, and so that part's important to me as well. And I think, yeah, tough luck if you can't say it, learn, take a stab at it. It's okay. You're not going to insult me. Don't insult me. Don't try to go overboard. Don't make fun of me.
Hmm.
Please, please, please don't sing Sweet Caroline to me. But um, yeah, I can't tell you
She's
how many
not a Neil Diamond fan. She didn't name you after him.
times. But at the same time, yeah, I don't see a reason to have to change my name. You have, I think you owe your friend Christina an apology too, right? That was what you want to do.
Yes, yes. Let's be clear that when we're talking about names that are challenging, we're not necessarily talking about names from other cultures. I mean, Kirstine MacLeod. Well, her name is actually it's a Scottish name, the pronunciation for what we would in English call Christine. So for years and years, everybody I know has called her Christine. But now, when she actually, her actual signature of her name on her identifier, like you have Caroline and I have Susan, she has it spelled phonetically so people know how to pronounce it. And when I was interviewing her on a panel at a distinguished literary festival, it was the first time I realized I had been mispronouncing her name for years, for years. And there it was. Finally, she had it, Kirstine, and I thought, oh my gosh, okay, fine, I can behave. So she's giving readers the heads up and making it easy for everyone by spelling it phonetically so we'll all understand. And that's because she is a famous author now. So she does want people, whoever is introducing her. But she also was this beautiful, benevolent yoga teacher. So she went for years and just allowed the rest of us to kind of, call her whatever we wanted. But yeah, but it's an interesting thing, because a lot of writers also, they instead of even using their first name, they'll just go by initials. This is a really common thing, especially among women authors. And we were talking about this ahead of time, and obviously seems to be something that worked for a couple of people in particular. So yeah, J.K. Rowling and her 500 million books that she sold in her series, and E.L. James for 50 Shades of Grey, who 150 million 15 million copies in the first 9 years.
Yeah, of just the first book, not even the whole trilogy.
Yeah.
The trilogy just is 10 times that, I think.
Yeah.
So exactly that. And then I guess that's the next idea, is that do you also, for women, do you give away your gender? Does that make a difference?
Exactly. And historically, that's been really problematic, right? Women trying to publish under their own name. We can go back to George Sand for that, right? How to get your work out there in a way that isn't dealt with pejoratively. So the initialisms have been a really attractive way of doing that, where people were just like, well, okay, whoever this person is, we have to sort of take it on merit. So that's been a common thing. Katie Miller is a good example of a Canadian author who's done that. She's Kathleen to her friends, but she's Katie Miller to everybody else. And she hasn't varied from that. She hasn't changed that in her writing life, and that's worked really, really well. So yeah, just thinking strategically, think strategically, think it through with people who can help you think it through. Choose the name you feel comfortable with. I notice that often, because I deal with people at the beginning of their literary careers, people will often use, their full name, like Liz Windhorst Harmer, who now only goes by Liz Harmer, right? She dropped the Windhorst, which is such a fantastic name, and that's her name. Would be her maiden name. Like, what a fabulous name, Windhorst. It's so beautiful. But in the long run, she's like, nah, Liz Harmer, Liz Harmer, Liz Harmer, Liz Harmer. That sticks in the brain. So sometimes you have to make compromises, what you wanted to do and what you've been called through high school. It's time to think it through, come up with something different.
Yeah. And I mean, we'd love to know what kind of challenges you've experienced with your name. So drop us a line, comment, let us know. We'd love to talk about it, because I think we both find it to be a really fascinating topic.
Yeah. And because we're here for you. That's why we're here.
That's right. And we'll do our best to pronounce it and not butcher it.
Yeah, and I mean, these whole conversations they're learning conversations for us, right? It kind of pulls from our experience, but we're here to have a conversation with the larger public. So we'd love to hear what your experience was.
Exactly.
And we can stand. We're happy to be corrected too if we've gotten it wrong.
Oh yeah, tell us that. I grew up speaking English, Polish, and French. It's a combination of all of the above that I'm drawing on to try to pronounce a name.
Yeah. And this is language, right? It's the writing world. So the words count, and our love of words, and our, just our care for one another. So caring for the author, just think of it as part of your care and feeding for the author. And when you're choosing your own name, think of it as the care and feeding of the author, your inner author, and right. You're going to live with that for a long time. You're going to see it in lights. You're going to, yeah. So be good to yourself.
So thank you for joining us today. Make sure you like and follow us, and tell everyone you know about our chats, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.